renter, but I did want to provide the public with some additional information that way. Next slide. You guys have seen these slides before. I think they're in your packet. So I would stand for any questions at this time.
Council, I failed real quick to mention that there is a slightly revised PUD resolution on the dais tonight that addressed just a couple of things that got called out to me this week. One being a typo in paragraph 12HV. It should have been inclusion of a decorative fence or masonry wall of at least 3 feet, but no more than 4 feet. I had typed less than 4 feet to make things super confusing, so that was corrected. And then I also clarified for the commercial parking lot can deviate from the spacing requirements for intermediate landscape islands, and clarified that the number of intermediate landscape islands can be no less than if the spacing requirements were followed, and all landscaping islands must meet the minimum size requirements. So that was just a clarification point, and that's paragraph 10K. And then there was also one more change having to do with the screening of the drive-throughs. Paragraph 10L. Just to clarify that, I think that a couple of you had said that you couldn't find the requirement that the drive-through lanes be screened. I did have in here that drive-through lanes on lots 2 and 5 of Block 5 can be between the building and a frontage, but must be screened per our screening requirements. But I did have a slight typo that I corrected, but it's in section 1060.070, subdivision 2J, which requires 80% screening to be obtained. We can certainly discuss that again. We're trying to weigh it with public safety's desire to be able to access the buildings, but we can certainly, that's the starting point offered in the resolution for you tonight. And those are the changes.
Okay, thank you. Any questions for the applicant?
I have one.
Go for it.
I believe I know the answer, but suppose you're getting the preliminary application approved, or that's your aim, and you sell it to somebody. Who's to say that they don't do whatever they want once they own it?
Mr. Mayor, Councilman Gautam, this resolution would get recorded against the plat for the project. So the approval rides with the land is one of the protections. The second would be that any modifications that vary significantly, the answer of significantly would rise with staff, but it would be significant departure would require PUD amendment in this case. So it's not as if any successor could come in and drastically propose something different and basically write off of this PUD. It's got to be substantially similar to what has been proposed in this document.
They would have to go through the same process.
Correct. Yep.
Can I ask you a question? I'm assuming the illustrations of the commercial buildings that you've shown are just for illustration purposes and not intended to project an anticipated tenant.
They are not intended to project an anticipated tenant. It's purely for reference of the type and scale of building that, for a medical office that's present in our market.
Okay. And then the buildings proposed with a drive-through?
Yes.
What type of business would that be?
Yeah, so let me explain that a bit. The idea with positioning or the option for a drive-through in this case is simply from a marketability standpoint for a multi-tenant retail and commercial building. So the type of things would be, an ice cream shop or a coffee shop, that type of development that would require that drive-through use. What it ends up doing from a marketability standpoint is you just broaden your tenant base, your potential tenant base, and so it's just what we're trying to do with that is ultimately say, hey, if we're going to ask for it at some point, we should do it on the preliminary side instead of having to have that applicant come in and ask for a PUD amendment off the jump.
Yeah, and then the reason I bring it up is because we've got a requirement for screening, but screening on drive-throughs, I worry as a person going through a drive-through, is there somebody hiding behind the screening? You know, if it's gonna be a bank and it's an ATM, or is
Sure.
it gonna be something where I have to worry about
Somebody stealing your coffee.
or carjacking or,
Depending on the day.
you know. So I'm wondering
We
what's the
do have
intent of
fun
the
up here
screening?
sometimes. Sorry, guys. Sorry, Mr. Mayor.
So the intent, so basically right now, the code doesn't, the idea is you're not supposed to have drive-through lanes that face a road frontage. And that's it's a little difficult on this side to begin with, considering it has road frontages on two sides.
Uh-huh.
So no matter which way you orient the building, oh yeah, so no matter which way you orient the building, there's gonna be a portion of the drive-through lane that would be visible from a frontage. So the idea of the screening is to try to meet the intent of that rule. But if the council is not too concerned about the screening or just wants to see some level of enhanced landscaping, not necessarily 80% screening, we can certainly build that into the resolution.
Yeah, I mean, personally, I'd be more interested in landscaping than a 80% opacity and some type of screening, just for a public safety standpoint.
And where exactly are we?
Well, there's this building here and this one down here both has drive-throughs. I just don't know what the future tenant is
Right.
gonna be. So to require somebody put up a privacy fence and it turns out that it's gonna be a Walgreens drive-up or something like that, and you're sitting there in your car, I would hate to have somebody get carjacked waiting, just because we required some opacity requirement.
I gotcha. Any thoughts on that?
Agreed. The public safety side is huge. Even though I made light of it, I apologize. But
I don't know. I don't have an opinion about that.
the drive-through too are another concern of mine as far as location. A lot of places end up putting the drive-through right next to the building, and they surround the building, and all the pedestrians going in have to walk through that drive-through. I see a well-thought-out plan that it's not surrounding the building, there's some parking in between. So that was one of my concerns, but I didn't think about the screening and stuff.
I guess my initial thoughts is I would want some sort of screening, but to your point, does it have to be that 80% opacity? Maybe not if we are concerned about the
May
public
need to
safety
be,
aspect.
may need to be there too, related to lights towards County Road 30 or
Yeah.
County Road 116 too. It's got a berming or something needs to not have those lights all of a sudden shining to oncoming traffic from,
Right. That would be
just
important.
thoughts.
I like
Can I invite Matt to speak as to the level of risk in a drive-through versus at a stop sign or stoplight or parking in a parking lot?
Yeah, so I mean, everything is gonna be very site dependent. I mean, with this being speculative, I think there are ways, when you look at the actual setbacks and the lighting and, you know, what type of traffic you're going to see. So as Jay had talked about earlier with the tunnels, that access to the area, how much side travel there is, how much lighting there is, what kind of sight lines you have from the building. Is it all windows facing that side, or is it more concealed? So, I mean, it's hard to say when you're looking at such a speculative theory. I would, again, I'd like to comment, obviously, we have a pretty safe community here, and we like to keep it that way, and I think being thoughtful on these things and having these discussions, there's a lot of value in that, so thank you for bringing that up, and I think it's really hard to speculate as far as the risk of being carjacked in that drive-through versus a stop sign. I don't know those statistics.
Another question I had from Planning Commission comments and such, the drainage watershed is gonna obviously take care of many of those things. I love cemeteries. I love looking at cemeteries, but there was supposed to be screening a long time ago on this cemetery. We don't talk about those things. Are all of those things resolved or will be resolved?
I apologize, that was a change to the resolution, Commissioner. Oh,
Okay.
I'm sorry, you're not a commissioner, Counselor Barron.
It's all right. You can call me anything you want, Natalie.
He's been called worse.
So we did meet with Mr. Lothar, and the previous approvals stand and we'll move forward. and we called it out. Paragraph 12H6 further requires that the existing cemetery screening that was approved go in.
Yeah.
So that it is now double enforceable. We have it in 2 spots, and that previous approval will get closed out once that screening goes in, and it is a requirement of this moving forward that it be addressed.
A lot of the drainage on this property goes northeast, if I'm correct. I'm worried about the property southwest corner of County Road 30 and 116 and their drainage and stuff, probably some failed tile, those kind of things. But if that farmer continues farming and he chooses to correct his tile to County Road 30, it goes under, it falls, so to speak, the flowage falls into this property and then it ends up in storm sewers, I assume. If I'm way too ahead, so be it. I'd like to see some of this stuff dry up because it never was this wet 25, 30 years ago, so.
I do know there's been a significant effort to try to correct some of the flow from the south, and I don't know if their engineer is ready to speak to that, but the exact situation you're calling out. But I know that there's been a lot of effort to try to minimize the impacts, so.
And then I got one more question about Hunter's Ridge, so, or Drive, whatever we call it.
Yeah.
Hopeway, whatever.
If you'd like to speak on that, if you
Yeah,
want to.
Mark Anderson from Somatech, our civil
Thank
engineer,
you.
can speak to the drainage question.
I'll just spend a minute on this, but if you have questions.
Here, let me set the timer quick.
If you have questions, I can certainly go in more depth. But this is a bit of a unique property from a drainage standpoint in that there's drainage actually coming from the south and then going off the site in 3 directions, to the northeast, up here, directly to the east here, and then also to the west. And according to the watershed and city rules, we can't send water a different way. It all needs to go the same direction it is today and at the same rate that it does today in the 10-year and the 100-year storms. So we have to meet all of that. And we've got 6 primary ponding areas around the site to achieve that. So substantial retention on site so that it discharges slowly. And then this yellow line represents the drain tile that comes from the south. That'll be routed around the perimeter of the site and then discharged at the same location that it flows today. So we recognize all of that uniqueness. We got some input from the Caffrades. You know, there will have to be a swale here. We need to maintain drainage patterns. It needs to be, you know, the same or better, really, is the goal of the project.
You've had to taken care of the Caffrades because they haven't called. I did. They were extremely concerned about that and such, so.
Yeah.
And then the last question I had was Hunter's Ridge. If, and I'm gonna say it, no matter how many people don't like it, if Hopeway goes to that east-west extension, can Hunter's Ridge not be a future road, but we keep the easement for utilities and those kind of things?
That's exactly what staff.
That's what we're planning?
Yeah, basically,
Okay.
we're open to, we would like to keep the right-of-way in place for utility planning, but agree that having this east-west connection makes it less likely that a road needs to.
That
go through.
opens that up,
Yeah.
and hopefully that's a good thing for those folks up there. And the reason I ask that is if you go out there and you look down the road and the easement, the wetlands are right there. We can't hardly do anything in the wetlands. But what easements would we want for that, for utilities and stuff like that? Are we talking more
We already
drainage,
have-
more, everything stubbed there already?
It's a right of way.
It's a right-of-way right now, so we wouldn't need anything more from Hunter's Ridge. As far as what we use it for, would be for future utilities, when the utilities are deemed to be available in that area.
Okay,
So water main looping, so you don't ever dead end water.
Yeah,
Better water
okay.
quality, better flow.
just the normal
Just-
stuff, but
there's
not
no reason
a,
to- Yeah, there's benefit to keep it and we own it, so we wouldn't recommend.
so that would stay Hunter's Ridge Or would that be renamed and then the new Hunter's Ridge
So
be Hope Way? And
speaking with Mike.
I'm gonna say it, I think that's 6 times I've said Hope Way, so.
I think that gets determined at final plat, right?
Yes, the initial thoughts, working with Mike Pritchard, who does at street naming and addressing, so what we're talking about is it would be 100th Avenue all the way to 116, so there would be a slight change when you first enter the site, but then when you turn right to go north, that would all be Hunter's Ridge.
Okay.
And then it changes to Oswald Farm when you turn left at that intersection so that would be the plan.
Mike is who I try to convince. Okay.
He's following a
No, I would
Give it a shot.
I'm not gonna give up. I'm sorry. I like Hope Way. There's 7 times I said it. If anybody's counting.
I have a couple questions.
Go for it.
2, I think I know the answer, sadly. The snowmobile trail that runs through the property.
Just go really fast.
There doesn't appear to be a workaround.
Got a 20-foot tunnel, man.
I know, I'm thinking about that. And then the other, obviously, there's enormous reservation about like a 4-story building. We've talked about that. And the commercial buildings or the kind of the office type buildings, I think indicated that you wanted to limit them to 2-story. And then the residentials are 4-story. I would just like to have you talk to me about why both aren't 3 stories.
Sure. So let me first talk about the medical office buildings. So when we first actually presented our concept plan to this council, both of those buildings are 3-stories tall. The reality is the parking ratio that as present in the code really restricts our ability to park what a 3-story building would be at that square footage. So I'm not so certain that we're restricting it to 2 stories, but also we almost are constrained by the square footage itself of the office. So if the office building wanted to be smaller and taller, that's certain, and it's still underneath the maximum height found within the Northeast Area District or the mixed use area, that wouldn't be an issue for us. And hopefully I'm not stepping on that word there, but.
Well, I'll just say that the resolution as it's currently written does specifically limit those to 2 stories. So if we want to limit it to square foot, then we would need to we'd have to change the resolution, so that'd be a conversation for council.
The idea there being, we could get creative with things like maybe there's parking underneath this building that would actually supplement it and that could go taller. But the idea right now when we laid it out was we're pretty constrained in terms of what that commercial parking is. We're already requesting some flexibility in terms of shared parking across the commercial and medical office uses.
Yeah.
So that's the thought process on how we landed at 2 stories in that building. It wasn't a function of height. It was purely a function of how can we park this square footage area. Okay. So relative to the 4 stories versus 3 stories on the multifamily buildings, I've used this when I've been talking with Brian, and really I think it's a kind of a good analogy that you could use throughout your city as well. As you're going to have density for this site. And it's really, how we thought about it is, it's almost like a balloon where you kind of get to choose where you push it. And in this case, we're wanting to push that density further away. What that does, though, is necessitate a building increasing in height. And how we're trying to mitigate that against that is simply saying, hey, we're not saying 4-story with a pitched roof that would end up being 60 plus feet in height. We're trying to say, we understand there's a height limitation. What we think is our buildings are going to be shorter than what would otherwise be if it was a 3-story with a pitched roof. So we can get the density, we can still minimize height to the extent feasible, and really push the density as far away from the northern neighbors as possible. Without that flexibility, what I think was well stated by Natalie through the presentation is, we'd be in a situation where we'd have to do apartment buildings throughout the development. We wouldn't be doing a villa, or we wouldn't be doing a townhome. We'd be back to a 3-story apartment building, a lot closer to these neighbors, than I think we're comfortable with, but certainly they would be comfortable with. And so that's the idea is, yes, we understand 4 stories, has been something that's been brought up by the public, but I would also state that just kind of in my research of the recent projects that have been approved in the city of Corcoran is 4 stories is somewhat the standard at this point. With a multifamily building or
There's only been 2, so I
Understood.
can't say it's
Well,
standard.
well, we're establishing the standard.
Yeah, one that's
Yeah.
been built.
One's getting built, the other one,
So I'm just,
Whatever
what
happened.
it was interesting to see is like, hey, we're at least in line with what others have asked for in terms of height. It's not, our departure or our ask doesn't feel as if it's excessive. I certainly hope you feel the same way, but that was our approach.
And I can also add the height of the building, it would be theoretically allowed in the GMU. The flexibility is more from the setback. And if you look at the 2 lots the multifamilies are on, they have street frontages on 3 sides. So arguably there is a bit of a hardship to be able to comply with an additional setback of 75 feet on all sides to be able to have the height that they're proposing. And additionally, the height that I have in the staff report is a little bit more than what they're saying that they're, and now they've had a chance to kind of figure out that it'd be 11-foot stories. It'd be a smaller building than what's currently called out in the staff report.
I just wanted to add to that. They are set back very far from existing residents who would be impacted most directly. So it's not like we're putting, in the case of Corcoran Farms, a 40-foot building across the street from a bunch of single-family homes. There is a good buffer here that makes it less of a concern to me.
Okay, can I ask, I think I know this answer, but County Road 30 and 116 are not our roads, but are they major collector roads?
They are,
Or highest volume road classification in the city?
Yeah, I think they would be in long-term forecast, so that besides Highway 55, they would be the highest volume roads forecasted for Hennepin County.
Okay, because there's a lot of concern about traffic, but for any roads to sustain traffic in our city, these roads are the best suited for any type of traffic. And we're not going to have any development without any type of additional traffic. Do you have any idea what the county's plans are for County Roads 30's 610 extension?
I have been working on it like crazy.
Do we have a time frame?
So the 610 extension is proposed to be completed in about 2 years. 2026, I believe, is when it's gonna physically make the connection. I've had some conversations with Representative Robbins and Senator Limmer about potentially looking at bonding options and working with the county on getting them to the table for their portion of it, because it's kind of a weird mix of MnDOT, county, and then not really ours, but whoever wants to initiate that project. So it's a lot of people in the pot on that one.
you're
but
talking for County Road 30 from
from where like,
the
Maple
roundabout is
Grove,
supposed to come all the way out.
from the Maple Grove border essentially
Okay.
to just past this site at least.
Thank
So I
you
think
for
in the
doing
next-
that.
Of course. I think in the next couple of years, we'll see some clarity on what improvements will be made in addition to the improvements that are required by development as it comes in, the additional turn lanes, things like that. As other sites develop over the next couple of years, as that connection is made, we'll have a sense of when and what the scale of improvements are. But I can't imagine long-term that there won't be a pretty substantial improvement to County Road 30, 1/6 connected, just because that is such an increase in traffic.
I think we need to get some clarity as a city on what we want that to look like. Where do we want that traffic to be able to go? Where do we want to retard it from growing so that we can mitigate impact elsewhere? I did check the comp plan. 116 north of 30 is a minor expander, which is the next level down from Highway 55 for us. And then 30 is a minor connector, which is the next step down. And 116 south of the site is other arterial, which is the next one down from that.
Okay. Thank you.
all the construction we're asking be done in one weekend too, right?
At Christmas time.
Exactly. This year you could have done that.
And I'll just add the off-site improvements would be phased. So in their phasing plan they have, there's a question earlier, you know, make sure that they're phased, or it should be phased. So when we get, if it's approved in the master contract, we will set timelines for when the improvements are triggered, or estimated timelines, and then those are reviewed each plat that comes in. So if it follows the plan, the first phase is up at 100th or Hope Way, that whatever the turn lanes up there will be required, and likely in addition to the improvement at the intersection of 30 and 116, and then when enough density or use comes in, then the access improvement to the new access to 30 will be required. So we do phase those improvements when necessary, and that's determined with the master contract if the development gets approved at the first preliminary or first final plat approval.
The improvements on 116 at Hunter. So warrants would dictate from the county if a stoplight's put in there, but is there even enough space that the county would consider a stoplight between there and 30?
Not between, I mean, they won't allow any more accesses between the existing.
Yeah, I'm not saying I worded that incorrectly. Let me rephrase that. Is the location of Hunter in proximity to 30 far enough away that they would even consider a light, even if warrants
I
dictated?
believe it is. Yes.
Okay.
But with this project doesn't trigger warrants
Right.
in their numbers, so
Even at the full build out?
that's correct.
Oh,
Their warrants are hard to meet, which is frustrating. But that's the process they go by.
Would, and this is a hypothetical question, but the project that was pulled from tonight had access coming off 116, would that have benefited for warrants on something like this, or no?
I don't believe that property touches that intersection.
Yeah, it's for sure. it's
So it would
far.
have nothing, I would say, well, I guess I have no idea.
It would pull traffic into the area potentially, so
that's
you might
correct.
get more numbers on 116.
Yeah, we don't have enough data to make that conclusion. So yes, I misspoke. It likely does something to that, but that would be determined likely through the EAW or whatever process would be triggered by that proposal. So thank you for correcting my misspoke.
I have a question. Yeah, look, I usually do it at this stage. Just to clarify, the senior building, so your notes on the site plan stated that the multifamily buildings are 4 stories. And I'm starting to hear that the senior buildings are also 4 stories
Correct.
as well?
Yep.
Okay, so then I apologize, we do need to make a change we would need to make the change to paragraph 10C to also allow that flexibility from the height setback for the senior portion. So I would be able to make that adjustment, but if that's something we would want to see per the plan, then we would have to change the resolution.
10C,
10C that basically the standards for commercial and multifamily buildings, we would need to expand it to, I believe it's block 2 to block 1 for the senior housing as well.
Does that fit with everyone's understanding of what the project was?
Yeah.
For the purposes of not losing track, I'll make a motion to amend the draft resolution to add that clarification.
second,
Thank you.
Motion and second. Any
if
further
you need a
discussion?
second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay.
Mr. Mayor, may I?
Yeah,
I have a few items.
go for it.
The first one that I wanted to touch on was garage sizes. I didn't see a requirement in the draft approval resolution. I do feel strongly that we need to make sure that garages are big enough to contain all of the plethora of garbage cans that Hennepin County requires us to impose upon people. So I would like to add a requirement that when those portions come in, there's a confirmation process, there's enough parking and storage within the garages to accommodate the then current requirements.
Okay. Trying to think of how that would be structured.
You'd almost have to, I mean, I don't know how you do it.
Yeah.
It's almost a give take then, because if they could say, well, you can get a two-car garage if you put, you know, cars in there or whatever the smallest car is of the day. We did go garage size reduction on townhomes at the Vera. And I don't know how far that deviation was from our standard.
I can't remember Tavera, but I feel like Walcott Glen was about 420 square, or it was 400 square feet. I have a list of all our PUDs and flexibility, so I can pull it up in a second.
I know the graphs that I've seen of the smaller garages, it might have been Tavera. I could see fitting 2 cars, but there's not room for anything else in what we had approved, from what I remember.
Yeah. Garage size is a struggle for any home, even single-family homes these days.
They can't be big enough for what you want to put in them, but they need to be big enough for what you have to put in them. So we don't want a lot of cars in the driveway because of temptation for crime.
Could just build a pole shed.
And we don't want people having their garbage cans outside all the time either. So
Tavera, it was, oh, I'm so sorry, go ahead.
with the need to have a garbage can, a recycling can, and soon a organics can, well, unless somebody changes the law, when we get to 10,000 people, we'll have to have that. From what I
That'll be a
understand.
while.
It'll be another, like, 2 years.
10,000 at a census.
It'll be a while.
Okay, well,
Get a little bit longer.
we'll drag that out as long as we can.
Yeah.
But at some point, before all of us retire, maybe some of us will retire,
I'll be done before then.
it'll be an issue. So if we can go with the square footage, I'm fine with that too. We don't need to keep it that flexible,
Is
but
there-
I think we need a requirement.
Is there a way that the townhouse side can, and I already don't like my question, can that be just common dumpster receptacle type deal and it goes away from it? I don't even like
Someone
it.
who
Can I
lives
just
in a
retract
townhome,
that
I
whole
would really-
statement?
Yeah, I'd
It
recommend
just,
not
sorry.
doing that.
Never mind. I didn't
Jeremy,
say
what-
that.
What were you saying about the last thing you said there about doing it square footage wise?
We could either have a square footage requirement that we just impose in the resolution, or we leave it open to the point of decision when we get a specific
Yeah.
request in for that part of the parcel to develop.
And what does the resolution state?
It's silent
So-
on it now, I think.
A resolution is, I believe it's paragraph 10M, we used to talk about garage sizes. So MI2, the garages for the detached villas can have a garage that comprises up to 70% of the street facing linear building frontage. I am concerned, we're gonna see a PUD amendment on that when we have actual building plans, so I think having some flexibility there, or having a minimum garage size makes sense, potentially a requirement that the front door is visible from the street to try to get the intent of that garage maximum. And then the next paragraph, the garages for the row homes must have a minimum width of 20 feet and accommodate 2 cars. So those would be the 2 standards we'd be looking at changing potentially. And then I just wanted to circle back to Vero. We provided a flexibility that garages are allowed to exceed 55% of the building space for the single-family villas and twin homes. And then that was, it was just exceed 55%. And then garage minimum size for the attached homes or twin homes was 420 square feet with a 19-foot width, where we require 440 square feet with a 20-foot width. And then Walcott Glen was similar, but they did a 419 square foot minimum size with a 19-foot 3 inches width. So, yeah, I think there's a couple ways we could approach it, but we have approved about 420 square feet in the past as a minimum, and then I would say I think it's important that whatever minimum we establish, that the villas also have the ability to have that minimum as well.
Okay.
Would you have concerns about 440?
Boy, without without an actual applicant in, in front of me in terms of the floor plan, it'd be tough to say. I guess what I would say is if we could start with a minimum, and this council basically has the opportunity to say, hey, can you provide us an exhibit that you can fit 2 cars plus the garbage cans and whatever else that's, at the time. You kind of almost punt on the can it fit a garbage can, and you keep the lower minimum standard to just get, something that you can consider, rather than having a hurdle that gets to the point where we're not able to facilitate something, I guess is my point. What I would say is, there's ultimately going to be, if Lennar and those type of home builders are looking for, a 420 feet garage, it's based on some sort of research that they've done here. I'm not trying to match Lennar's quality, or, I don't see us going with that, it's going to be in excess of that, but also want to provide this builders some flexibility to come in with a more creative plan potentially.
I'm struggling to think of how we want to word this.
So I'll make a motion to amend the draft resolution to add item 4 under MI. And my text would be garage sizes must be a minimum of 420 square feet and accommodate 3 garbage receptacles. Open to edits, but
Just to clarify, I love it. I think that's a great ad. My concern is the 70% street facing without having a plan in front of us, being able to confirm that it'll comply with that 70% rule. Do we want to nix paragraph 2? Do we want it to comply with both standards, or which standard do we want to prevail if there's a conflict?
That's a really good point, Natalie. So,
Is that where you discussed the potential standard of front door being visible from the street being added in place of that?
Yeah, maybe removing the percentage, but just requiring that the front door is visible from the street. The front door entrance is visible.
and I think to be clear, and we've talked about this before, the goal with that is to not have a side entry on the front door, is to have some, some presence, and I think they call in the business a snout house, where it's basically a garage that you see and you've got a side entry for the garage, or for the main entry. So I agree with you, that's not something that we would want to see on the project anyway. So the regulation of a visible front door is acceptable to us, and I think what Ned was trying to avoid is a situation where you guys say, hey, you got a minimum garage standard, but then you have a maximum frontage standard for the garage itself. So it's really more of a performance standard that you're looking for, which is visible front door. And I think that we're aligned with that, for sure. We like that idea.
Jeremy, you were making a motion.
that would be an edit on a different line. I think we can handle that separately.
Okay. So did you make, that, your motion was, can you reiterate it again for us?
To add item 4, that garages shall have a minimum square footage of 440 and fit 3 trash receptacles as well as 2 vehicles.
440? I thought you just mentioned.
Sorry, 420.
Okay.
420.
I don't think you'll have a problem getting that in a 420 garage. That's a 20 by 21. So,
Okay. Do we have a motion? Do we have a second?
second.
Any further discussion on it? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
That's amended.
Another question, just real quick for the applicant. I think back, a perfect case of buy everything around you and then be part of the development. And you guys have done this. How much are you going to be involved in with design of these buildings as your neighborhood? Design of the buildings, quality of buildings, all of that stuff. How much are you going to be involved once sales are made and the vendors are going to come in and start building and stuff? How much are you guys, the whole group, going to be part of that development and making this look
Yeah.
Somebody said it tonight, needs to look nice.
Yeah, so-
We all want that.
So, it's funny, Brian and I talk about this a lot. So, how can we have some sort of measure of control here? So I think there's a couple of things. We certainly will be helping future applicants as they work through the city process. We've developed a really solid, I think it's a solid relationship with city staff because, this is very complex as you're reviewing it right now. We've certainly spent a lot of time. I think we can add a lot of value to any future applicant that goes forward with the final plat.
And again, our staff is gonna help us. We're going to be extremely critical if this goes through
Yes.
of how these things look.
So the other thing, so to answer your question, we will be involved. To the level of our involvement is highly dictated by who comes in the door and if they want our help or not.
Okay.
But the thing that I think should bring this council comfort is that, we have committed to the Northeast area standards for architecture and for landscaping, these other items that this body as well as planning commission and this community has spent a lot of time on. And so while I might not be the person that's, providing specific direction to their architecture team, you've done that. And so I feel like there's a lot of guidance that is going to steer those future applicants in a correct path that's going to provide some quality.
I have one thing to that.
Sure.
Thank you.
If you could grab the mic, that'd be great, just so we have.
One of the differences between, our application here and a typical developer is once a developer finishes his development, they move on to another site. But we're not, our church is a central part of this whole development. And we're going to be there after it's done. And so we want to not only be proud of this, it's in a sense a legacy of ours, and we don't want it to just be sloppy, shall we say. And so I think one of the things that Josh and I talked about is vetting, in a sense, the potential applicants, which we've already been in the process of which one do we really want to grant this opportunity to, and what are their standards, and what does their product look like? And that's really a driving force for me as the lead pastor of the whole community, and the fact that our church is still going to remain there after this development is done. So do I have a way of guaranteeing what it's going to look like? Not yet, but it is equally important to us that when we drive onto that site, buy these different products that are going to be built, we like what we see and we're proud of what has been done. And so I think we can have somewhat of a measure of control over that by actually who we grant a sale to and the kind of product they build.
One more question and I think I'm done. What is the future of the church? What is going to go in your front yard? Is it going to stay grass? What are your plans? You've dreamt all of this up over 23 years, 24 years of everything, and it's neat to see if this passes something come to fruition that somebody has well thought this out. What's the church going to look like in 20 years?
Well, I could probably tell you that I won't be the lead pastor in 20 years.
You'll keep visiting, but
I might visit from time to time.
just asking
As far
what's
as
the vision?
actual build out of the remaining area for the church, that would probably be dependent upon the nature of our needs.
Yep.
And what we're looking at there. And so I think we have a very functional assembly area that can be used for multi-purposes. And so we do concerts, we do dinners, we do gun safety.
You've done a lot for our community.
We do
Thank
all
you.
those kind of things out of our what some people might call our sanctuary space. But probably if we do have 11,000 square feet of basement under our building with 9-foot ceilings. So once sewer and water come in, we will be able to utilize that space by sprinkling it. And that will give us a lot of smaller assembly.
There's
areas.
growth in the footprint you
Yes.
have right now.
Yes, there
Okay.
is, and then, so the future will kind of, our future needs will kind of dictate what ends up happening for the rest of that area.
Thank you. I'm intrigued.
I want to take care of Natalie's business.
Uh-oh.
And edit item 2 under 10MI, which currently has a 70% street-facing linear building frontage requirement. And I'll make a motion to amend the draft resolution to remove that requirement and state that designs must ensure that the front door is visible from the street.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Hi.
And I wanted to try to address Alan's concern about screening for the drive-throughs. So I originally liked having a lot of screening there, because I do think it's not ideal to have a long line of cars like I see at Caribou on
Yeah.
97th all of the time when I go past it. So maybe a hybrid requirement that would allow a little bit more visibility might be you require 60% screening rather than 80% screening, so there's more open area for observation.
Natalie, where is this in the?
So it is
K.
10,
No, it's
it's not 10? No, 10L. 10L, drive-through lanes on lots 2 and 5, block 5 can be between the building and frontage, but must be screened per section 1060.70, subdivision 2J. So would we also want that, are we okay with limiting the screening to the height of the drive-through window? Would that also, just so that the signage for the building could to accommodate the signage as well? So maybe we just change it to must be screened at 60% opacity in the spirit of section 1060.70, because there's some additional language as to what kind of vegetation you want to see, and that would take care of it. And to the height of the drive-through window.
Is it, as is the requirement 80% opacity? If we were lowering the height, would we also need to lower the opacity?
Well, how's the opacity obtained? Is it obtained by a man-made fence or is it obtained by shrubbery?
You, 80% you typically see a fence because of that opacity requirement. It's hard to achieve with just shrubbery. 60% arguably we could achieve it. The only issue is the clustering, I suppose, of landscaping.
I think that was more for the large multifamily
Yeah.
buildings.
Okay, perfect.
Greater need there. This one we can, with hose poles and other access, we
Okay.
That makes sense.
less.
So I
And
think,
just to be clear, it's the bottom, or like the ledge or the bottom of the drive-through window, so that we're blocking headlights, not blocking the entire, what's the intent, I guess, of the screening? Maybe I'm just looking for some additional direction.
I'd want
As is,
headlights.
Headlights make sense, I understand.
The facade of the building and stuff. I don't want to hide that if it looks good. Signage is taken care of in our codes and ordinances and everything else.
I was
Is
thinking
that
the
what
height
you're
of the
thinking?
cars.
Don't you think a fence along the, if it was 80%, a fence would look pretty ugly?
Yes.
along
All the
it?
fences I've seen would, yeah.
Yeah.
I think shrubbery is better.
Yeah.
But I was thinking the height of the vehicle, so you're not exposing the line of cars in its entirety.
so I would say, like, I think it would mostly be accomplished if it was to like the top of the drive-through window, I suppose, if that was the goal. And you're still gonna have some vehicles that will exceed that, but most vehicles should be screened.
So, I guess, this is where my landscape architect brain comes in, sorry.
You're the man for the job.
One of the things that I would prefer would be, yeah, I get what you're saying in terms of blocking the car. What I would like to do is have a situation where I could do a lower hedge to block the headlights, and then have an overstory tree that would say take any taller vehicles. And you might have, at least initially, some spread between, where that hedge looks and where the understory of the larger trees would be. But you're significantly blocking out the visibility of the vehicle itself. It's just accomplished in a different way. And to your point, even, berming would be, we certainly have plenty of room where, relative to that 50 feet, where at least on the one drive-through, that's something that could be accomplished. So I understand we're trying to put some bounds around it, but I also think that there's a lot of different ways where we can hit, you know, the intent of what we're trying to do relative to drive-through screening. Through the use of grading, plant material, I agree, a fence just isn't ideal from that perspective of, you know, kind of an awkward situation along those frontages. So.
Wouldn't the tree block the signage that you're trying to present?
It depends on the placement of the signage. I mean,
Okay.
without having the elevation in front of me, I mean, for example, like I would say the primary location you'd want to screen is when those cars are about to make the turn to run parallel to one of the roads. That's where those headlights really are going to be glaring, and that's where not where that signage is going to want to be. It's going to want to be further in down to the building. So I think there's just some details that we could work through on a site level that maybe aren't well. I don't know how we can handle that at this exact stage, but I think in terms of verbiage, other than stating what the intent is that this is meeting 60% or, you know, providing, you know, screening to both headlights and the majority of the car, you know, location. I don't know how that's worded, but I can completely understand where you're going with it. I'm just saying, hey, let's be maybe a little bit more flexible to how that's actually applied.
Okay, I'll take a shot at it. I make a motion to amend 10L to add the desired screening must achieve approximately 60% opacity with natural material, shielding the majority of the cars and drive-through.
That's perfect. Thank you.
So majority of a car could be from the window down. Okay, I'm fine with that. I want to be able to, if I'm in a car sitting at drive-through, I want to be able to see everything around me. So screening from below down makes perfect sense to me.
Okay. Sorry, I was trying to think that up. So we do have a motion. Do we have a second to that?
I'll second it.
Alan seconded. Any further discussion on it? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Okay, so that is amended.
My last one is around the resiliency measures that are called for in the Northeast District. So my thought process was any parcel that develops in the area has to include at least 3. You can get 2 really easily just based on your plant selection. So one of them is xeriscaping, one of them is native plants. So I'm expecting that for anybody who wants to come in, just by choosing the right shrubberies, they're going to be able to meet 2. At what point will we know what the third would be? And is council agreed that every parcel should have 3? Or if somebody is going to develop, 80 acres with 20 different parcels, and only 3 of them each use one of the strategies, does that meet the intent of the standard?
That staff's interpretation was, and correct me if I'm wrong, that it's development-wide, not lot-specific.
So the wording in the Northeast District Plan is that each development must utilize 3. So I think when we established these resiliency strategies, it was important to have flexibility. It wasn't trying to necessarily punish, but trying to set a requirement but give the flexibility. I think it might be harder to meet on a per lot basis. To your point, theoretically, every lot should be able to meet 2. I don't know if it's necessarily the xeriscaping can be met. We'd have to look at that. But the natural plantings theoretically could. I think some of the strategies, like the stormwater ponding, you're not going to see that on every lot. So that's why I think it's on a per development basis. But that was my thinking reading the language.
Thank you.
Could you share what xeriscaping is for everybody?
Minimal water required for the landscape.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Did you have a different?
No, that's what it says in the standard. So by choosing plants that don't require a lot of irrigation, you meet that standard.
Yep. Did you have anything else?
No, that was it.
Okay. I guess a couple things that I wanted to go back to because I feel like we talked about but didn't actually settle on. Trail location for the Diamond Lake.
I think when we talked about it, I thought I heard consensus with
Did we?
the hybrid
Is that what staff
north
got?
side for the majority, and then
Okay.
crossover.
I'm good with it.
But does that need to be memorialized in the resolution?
Let me look here to see.
Crossing to the north side, like past that parking lot for entrance.
Right.
I think I tried to leave it open just because we also have to, so it says the applicant will continue to work with the city staff and Three Rivers Park District to finalize the necessary trail easements and location as well as comply with the requirements of the Three Rivers Park District memo. So I think we could certainly add that the city preference is for a mid-block crossing. I don't know how else to, I know where it needs to go, but I don't know how to describe it at the moment.
Potential location of the street.
Or in accordance with the city staff recommendation location or something like that.
There's also some existing utilities that are probably within 20 feet of the road. And so that crossing would actually need to go beyond that utility structure, I think. Because because the trail's 20 feet, correct?
Trail easements.
Yeah, easement. And so I would say, however you want to word it, but it needs to cross beyond where those utilities cross under Oswald Farm Road. And there's also an above-ground utility item there as well, and it should be beyond that.
Okay, so the city's preference, you could amend to say that the city preference is for a mid-block crossing across Oswald Farm that would not conflict with existing utilities. And I think that leaves us with enough direction to finalize this with Three Rivers.
I'll make that motion.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Amended. What else?
I have one.
You were
Go for
talking trees.
Yeah, and we can either discuss it or vote on it, but I want to strike N-double-I from the requirements. And it's almost like a point of order, but it's not a point of order. But I'm not so sure Planning Commission, we have a set of trees that are appropriate that we have identified as appropriate for landscaping. And there happens to be trees on the site that were there for no scientific basis, but just random. And I don't know if it's a good idea to say that you specifically have to replace a tree with the same tree, when we already have an existing city code where we identify what trees need to be planted, or I think we've got that covered with the code. This is an additional burden that if we're going to impose it on someone, we should codify it.
Okay.
If we want to, it's not a big deal, but I just want to, like, I don't want to have a plan go to Planning Commission and then come out of Planning Commission with new rules that the city council has already made these rules. And these are changed. So I just want to strike that, unless one of you wants to add it. But I would like to strike it because I don't think it belongs here.
Okay.
If you want this to be the rule in our town, we should have a discussion and make it the rule in our town.
There needs to be an ordinance change for what
Yeah.
was commented, and I can speak a little bit to it. Early in the season, basswood trees are the earliest pollinators out there. And I'm sorry for those who've gone boring, I raised bees. And I've also said to some people that it's the worst tasting honey you ever had because it's like chewing honey with toothpaste in it. The basswood is tolerable up to a point, but I've had batches that I've had to throw out because I could have sold them to major toothpaste companies and could have done stuff. To Corinne's point, though, it is an early pollinator, and I think looking at all of our trees, to what you say and stuff, there are early pollinators that can replace basswood. But to, stay specific to basswood and such, I'm not a fan of it, but I understand the gist of it, but it is something that would need to be revisited in an ordinance. And the Northeast standards, I think, covered a lot of this stuff.
Can't rewrite ordinances in a resolution for a
Just
PUD.
Somebody wants to talk.
Yeah.
Because it's a PUD. We certainly don't have to if that's the desire of the council, but we can add additional standards as a part of the PUD negotiations.
I see, okay, then, yeah, we can, but I actually don't see a scientific benefit to replacing a random string of trees with their specific type. It doesn't make any sense to me. And it is a change from a existing city policy. So if you're gonna, as part of PUD, I think you need to have a benefit, and it needs to have extra, like a defined benefit, and it should face extra scrutiny since it runs contrary to an existing city code. So that's why I would ask that it be
Does it run
struck.
contrary to a code or just adds?
I think it adds an additional layer because it says this tree species must be, so like for elm, there's 2 elm species that are on their tree removal plan. And then so then there's 1, 2, 3, 4 types of elms identified on the Northeast District Plan for tree list. And so we're saying any of these elms must be replaced with the Northeast District approved elms. So it's an additional layer. I don't know if it doesn't necessarily run contrary, but it does add an additional layer of requirement and review.
How does, we've seen developments in the past, residential developments, where they've come in with a tree plan, right? And you've got multiple types of trees. Who's making that judgment? Is that the developer, which tree species they're putting in? Off our preferred list, or?
Ultimately, they submit a landscaping plan that provides the species and the quantities, and then I have to confirm that it meets the Northeast District Plan standards, yes.
And then as far as the mix and where they're placed? Because I think we've seen it in the past where we like stagger different tree species down like a street.
Yeah.
That's all on staff.
So the stagger isn't necessarily something that's called out in code. I think, again, it's probably something we've seen as part of like the streetscape desire for PUD to have some like 30% of no more than 30% of one tree species along the street, something like that. I'd have to pull up the actual approvals, but yeah,
So we have an existing code. Then it would be designed by probably a landscape architect. So it would be, fit all the descriptions that we had asked for already in code. I just think it's unnecessary.
So if
I'm gonna make a motion
okay.
that N double I be removed.
Okay, do we have a second?
I'll second it.
Any further discussion?
And just that expectation of like for like you're removing.
That's what
Yeah.
I wanted to get to.
They'll have to plant
And we'll
trees.
still have to
They'll have to
do-
plant trees
yep.
for sure.
No, I
I'm just
wanted
Would
to
you-
say it out
Angela,
loud.
Would you word that
so.
any differently than just striking entirely?
we can just strike it entirely, and
And it's
then
not getting rid of the replacement requirement, it's just this specific replacement type requirement.
correct. Yeah. So they will have to. It's not. They will have to provide trees off the Northeast District list. That's just the underlying
I
requirement.
would just get rid of the.
We're
with this
removing this
exact type.
additional layer.
Okay. We have a motion and a second. Anything else besides my comment? Or Dean's comment?
Nope, that was it.
Perfect.
Sorry.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Okay. That is amended. Anything else major sticking with people?
The only other thing that we talked about, I don't know if we need to do anything with it.
You
on
said
the-
that was your last one,
Hey,
didn't he? Go ahead.
The clustering of landscaping, does that need to be in the resolution? We don't have a detailed landscaping plan at this point anyway. I think,
Okay.
It'll be subject to public safety review when something comes in, so we probably don't need something for that.
If we wanted to put some things, 12H, it says the landscaping plan must be revised to show the following. We could add 5, 6, 7, that clustering along the county roads, particularly along the multifamily buildings, or an effort should be made to cluster the landscaping requirements along the county roads, particularly for the multifamily buildings.
For public safety.
For
Refer to
public,
the
yeah.
public safety memo, right?
Yeah, per the public safety memo. Yep.
Someone want to make that motion, or did you make that?
I can't. Dean won't let me.
I just,
I will let you.
So moved.
Okay, do we have a second?
Second.
There we go. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Okay.
Dean won't let me.
Yeah, when did you start listening? Okay, any other major items that want to be discussed or presented?
Can we have any more resolutions?
Well, we can have more
You
amendments.
gonna read all of these tonight?
I can do that.
Any of you plan on being home for dinner at 8:30?
Missed it.
I told my wife I have no idea what time we'll be home. You told my wife that?
No, yeah, I was gonna say, or you can interpret that I told my wife that, which my husband would be very upset to hear. But no, but I it was the same message to my
I
wife.
gotcha.
Or is on the school?
Perfect. Okay. Well, if there are no other items, I will entertain a motion to, and we can break this up if need be,
Wait,
but I think.
can we discuss I have some other things I
Oh,
just want
yeah.
to throw on the table quick. Not I thought we were going through actual changes. I want to talk about the proposal here for a second. I want to address some of the things people have said. And, I want people to know these votes are very, very hard, especially for me, because I grew up in the country. I live on a dirt road now. I've mentioned 100 times in council that my favorite time of the day is when I get past the last stoplight. And every house that gets built, I carry a map, it's older than yours, and it has the 13 original people who lived in Corcoran. And I imagine, and at that time, the average lot size was over a mile square. We're about 36 square miles, 13 people. Then at one point, everybody owned a section, which is a mile square. Then everybody owned a quarter section. And I bet the people that owned a mile square were very mad when somebody broke their mile square into 4 pieces and they said, man, the traffic is going to be terrible. It's going to be terrible.
Horse traffic's gonna be awful.
Yeah, and I don't, if we never got another house or another human moved into Corcoran, I wouldn't care. I'd probably actually like it. So it's not easy for me to be okay with additional housing ever. It's a challenge, and it's the same thing, and it's the same reason why you guys don't, new people who have moved in don't like it. People who have been here 10 years don't want more housing. And why people 100 years ago didn't want more housing. And so I'm ultra sympathetic to that. And I lean more towards less housing than more housing. That's just where my gut is on this and where my brain is. The traffic studies that we do, like we wouldn't have added a single house starting in like 1999 if traffic was the biggest concern. Our roads are overloaded. These roads are not built to take all the traffic, especially in the morning. The freeways are backed up. They go through every road in Corcoran. Drives me bananas. Drives everybody bananas. And I won't go on a rant about the state not doing anything about it, but they probably should expand the freeway. even more than they already do. So, but the traffic is studied to see if the roads can handle it. That's how every single development is done. And for me, then it becomes, is it the right to somebody to develop their property? Can they sell it? There are farmers in this community that have farmed for 150 years, and oftentimes people don't want development, and they want the farmers to gut it out for the rest of their lives when they could make 150 years of harvest in one cell of their land. It's like their 401k. I like looking at cornfields too, and I have some, but it's not my right to make someone else have corn on their land as much as I love it. And so we have a really tough job because we make decisions that impact people's lives, and sometimes some people are happy with us, sometimes nobody's happy with us, and we're put in this spot where we know tonight we've had people talk about some gut-wrenching feelings and thoughts about what's going to happen, and then we have people talk about how this decision can impact 25 years of planning and hoping for this dream that they've had. What I look for is whether it's thoughtful, sensible, or logical. And that's where I think, as far as what I see here, is it thoughtful? They've been thinking about this for 25 years, and the extra thought of being citizens and having stated they're going to be around for a long time impacts this for me. It is sensible. I think we benefit by having some density in areas where there aren't other houses, so we can use that. We got a recent ruling by the Met Council stated, written down, that we can offset density with high-density projects like this in other areas of the town. So in theory, we'd be able to develop less dense neighborhoods and not look so much like Maple Grove, which is what everybody wants.
And
And
not look like Maple Grove.
yes, thank you for clarifying.
Thank you.
I think half of our town used to live in Maple Grove. And the number one thing we get as advice is don't make our town look like Maple Grove. There's nothing wrong with that town, but we don't want to look like it. It'll allow us some flexibility in creating a town that's different, which I appreciate and it's sensible. And then it's logical to me as we move out from the urbanized edge out. I think it's timely, it makes sense, and they've put a lot of effort into making it make sense and making it thoughtful. So that's kind of my big picture thought on what's going on here, and it pains me sometimes when I have to acknowledge the fact that our little town is growing, and we all love the little town. So hopefully we can keep the character and the things we love about it good. That's our job. We try really hard to do it, but it's not always easy.
I agree with every word of that. That's really
I think
well said.
one thing that we should think about, we've talked about this, I think, at the concept level. I agree with what John said. It will create a need for all of the people who will eventually occupy this space to have access to the kinds of rural experiences, natural character that we really want to define Corcoran as a place. And the existing Parks and Trails plan doesn't really have anything in this area. We have the Bellwether Park that isn't connected. When Three Rivers goes through, that will provide a connection, but we're a ways out from that, and it's still a ways away. I think it behooves us to take upon ourselves a review of what we want the area around this parcel to look like, and maybe be a little opportunistic about acquiring some parkland in this area to serve that function going forward.
In this area being like
This
30.
intersection, this part of the city. Not on this parcel necessarily, but we have these broad areas where we're looking to put, neighborhood parks or open space parks in other parts of the city. We should revisit that and determine if we need to add additional space to serve a higher density area.
Okay. That could be something we could probably explore in some work sessions and with our consultant, and with JCB.
Noted.
I think one of the ways this could go awry, whenever you have new people come into an area that might have different expectations or desires, that has the potential to shift the culture of a place. And there's, I think, a broad consensus that I've heard so far that people move to Corcoran because they like open space. They like big trees. They like being able to experience, going out and seeing farm fields or participating in gardening and that kind of thing, whatever size parcel they may have. And personally, I identify with that desire. I'd want to see the city continue to have that culture. And so I want to make sure that those amenities are there to attract that kind of person, to maintain that continuity of vision for the city. Versus not doing that, and potentially the people who may move into a development like this might not want something like that. They may want a very different kind of town, which would cause more conflict for us in the future as a city.
Fair point. Yeah, I mean, I think it's certainly something that we continue to evaluate. It probably comes down to then, are you looking at where are you putting assets for your park investments?
Mm-hmm.
Does it make sense to focus on the few that we have, or to maybe do less in more places and kind of go to your whole philosophy with parks? But certainly something to keep evaluating as development happens.
I think the big difference between this development and every development that's ever come through in front of us is that the owner of the development is sitting right there, and he's gonna sit there at his house for years to come. Where every other thing that's come through is a corporation, buys the land, does what they want with it, and is gone. And they only care about the money in front of them at the time. He's never talked about that, the money. And I appreciate that. And I appreciate this is the only development that's going to have life cycle housing.
Big time.
A young person in this city cannot buy a house or find a place to live in this city. They have to leave. There's apartments there. There's townhomes there. As you get older, you can retire there. That's huge. And having the ability to have medical or some other type of shopping in town is great, because we need commercial. We need commercial bad. The tax burden is too heavy on individuals in this town. It has to be diversified, and I appreciate that. And I think you've done a really thoughtful job in laying this out. I know it's been years in the making. We've had discussions going back years on this, and I appreciate you coming to the council early and sharing those ideas. So, it may seem like a burden because it's coming to your neighborhood, but believe me, this is way better than what would have been item B tonight for your neighborhood.
No, there's a huge level of comfort, I think, knowing that you and the church are there and part of, you have invested, part of the community that you'll continue to be, and I think that gives me and the rest of the council a great level of comfort that we wouldn't normally have when you have your run-of-the-mill developer coming in and developing a site like that. So that certainly helps. And I do want to call out that I think you've handled in terms of reaching out to people and having some of the conversations with neighbors. We've been preaching that for years now. That's what we want people to do. And a lot of times it's tough conversations and there's not going to be a happy result. But I think going through the process is really important, and I want to call out that you have made steps to do that, and we do appreciate that, and I think that makes a big difference in the end, just going through that process, so just wanted to call that out. Anything else?
38 years for me in the neighborhood. Used to live in that silly town to the west of us, east of us, Maple Grove. Had 5-acre lot, 6 horses, beautiful place. Cub Foods was just getting built. Weaver Lake Road was a gravel road. Just some information for you guys. I got the heck out of Dodge. Where my property is now, there is 16 homes on my 5 acres. The density was huge, unbelievable, crazy. I moved out a mile from the west end of Corcoran, thinking I'd never get involved and I'd never do this again. I spent 17 years on the council, in the planning commission, and worked with the council in Maple Grove. We did a really good job, I think, but I think it can be done better out here. My wife twisted my arm, my daughter twisted my arm to get involved again, planning commission for a few years, and then an opportunity came here. I chose this. I do not take this lightly. I appreciate everybody's comments. I still live on a gravel road. I live across the street from a dairy farm, 3-generation dairy farm. You want to smell the country, come on out. They stir that slurry, the paint starts peeling off of my 120-year-old barn. And I sit out on my front porch and I love it. But yet I get calls from neighbors saying, can you do anything about the smell? Do you know what I tell them? Move away. And that's not very nice. But they've been there a lot longer than me. That thing has been done. Again, this group has had a vision. Lord of Life is another church that had a vision like this and stopped at the church. There's been a number of things that have gone up around them. That whole intersection has blown up. Was supposed to all be done in about 1995. All that was supposed to be done, and it's just finally coming to fruition. Like Alan said, these folks are going to stay there. They're going to be there. I think there's a number of people from the Hope Church community that are in the audience tonight too. Thank you for your visions. Thank you for believing in all of this stuff. I don't want to take up a lot more time, but this is a hard call. But it could be something completely different than this. And I like this. Still, it's going to be hard to say yes, but I like this. So, thank you.
Thank you. And just a fun fact, I think that came up in conversation the other week with us. I can't remember who it was with you and me. That last operational dairy farm in the Hennepin County is in Corcoran.
3.
Yeah, right.
There's 3 left.
Right.
One's across
Outside
the
of
street
Corcoran,
from me.
there isn't.
There isn't anymore.
Century Farm still
Yes.
operating in our community.
And my neighbor has no intention of buying air conditioning for his home or doing anything. So it's kind of a neat neighbor.
There you go. Okay. Is there anything else?
Any motions?
I will entertain a motion to approve Resolution 2024-14, approving the comprehensive plan amendment, adopt ordinance 2024-513, rezoning PUD, summary ordinance 2024-514 for publication, approve resolution 2024-15, approving the findings of fact for rezoning, resolution 2024-16, approving the preliminary PUD development plan, and 2024-17, approving preliminary plat, all as amended.
So moved.
Second.
Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All right.
Opposed? Congratulations.
Thanks for being here all night, guys.
Thank you. Thank you for all your input too.
Appreciate it, guys.
Hey, how's it going? See ya.
On a picture and trying to make comments.
Good to see you, sir. Nobody's gonna stay late? Come on.
We're just getting started.
My wife gave up before yours.
She did?
I know, that would have been a disaster.
I'm surprised more people didn't come.
For this?
There was, this was full and there's probably 20 people out there for the planning commission.
So we did just have to remove someone from Zoom who was doing some inappropriate racist activity and trying to make comments just for
Like in the
I
past.
never
Started
asked how
rolling
many
in, like we
people are
had
on.
15 people at one point,
Yes.
and they
15
kept trying to make comments, and I just kept shutting them
Like in the
down.
past where they have where,
Like right
So
now.
this one was anti-Semitic.
Yeah,
They can't, others can't see those postings, can they?
no,
No, it's comments to the city.
Yeah.
Direct messages.
yeah.
if they're
Thank you
violating that.
It's
for,
kind of funny, I guess. They must not have heard that we don't.
We don't do that anymore.
Yeah.
thanks for being the
They
big
tried,
gatekeepers,
Michelle's
guys.
managing it.
It made news. If you read in the paper.
Every city, if you look at the League of Minnesota Cities, there's basically a message board for mayors. Every city's talking about it. It's
Yeah.
been real bad across the state.
All right.
Should we,
We don't have anything else. do
no,
we?
not really. There's a couple housekeeping items, but we should maybe
My wife.
shut the door. and
My wife
maybe
doesn't. My wife is
Shush them.
out there talking.
Oh, is that? They can talk, just a little quieter. So I don't know how it's coming through on the mics. There we go.
And we do have the audio fixed up in the entryway,
Good
in the
deal.
atrium.
Good job, guys.
Problem
Thank you,
with
Michelle.
last.
Yeah, good job, everyone. Good deal. Well, we have, let's see here, no unfinished business, no new business. We have a staff report with a planning update.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
May I make comment though? I know 8B was not on the agenda, but there are things in my mind that come to light with 6B that after the Corcoran Farms approval, we talked about amending our zoning with regards to light industrial and whatnot. To me, this highlights the need to move those items up so that something like this would have been addressed in any ordinance changes we were going to make out of Corcoran Farms. Because this would have, the way it was presented, this would have fell right through what, like Corcoran Farms, what we didn't like about Corcoran Farms.
Potentially, yeah. I mean, I think that this was a concept plan, or several versions of a concept plan, so a little bit earlier on. Roughly where are we on the timeline, do we think, of being able to address some of those changes? I know it's on it's the next item on one of these pages in terms of our work plan.
So those particular issues are addressed as a goal out of our strategic plan. It was identified as a goal to be met or addressed in the second quarter,
Okay.
if I recall. But since that time, at our last meeting, council gave some direction of a higher priority item for the commission to.
Yeah, so at this time, staff is working, so at the planning commission meeting in March, the planning commission had asked for a clear table of uses across the district so they could have a better idea of what's allowed and what's not allowed in the uses to be able to provide feedback on that portion of the update. And then staff is also planning to discuss just the rural commercial districts and development rights question, just continuing that discussion with them so that feedback can be provided to council at the end of March, along with the survey results from the business community.
Okay.
Also in March is going to be a revised work plan because my understanding is we would now like to see the commercial rural updated immediately or as soon as possible. And so basically I'm envisioning a 3-phase process where we deal with the rural commercial development rights question, and then we deal with the question of storage before that moratorium expires, and then deal with the rest. So, I mean, we could definitely work through that work plan, but it's just that there's we are adding more priorities, and now we have the additional priorities of the sign policy, and it all takes time, and I am at capacity.
Yep.
So.
Question though, quick, and I appreciate what you're saying. This area that would have came in was mixed use. I don't see that as mixed use for industrial buildings.
Business park is.
Business park.
That was the concept coming to us, but it's zoned,
No, it's guided and
Business park.
zoned for business park.
guided and zoned for business park. That screws me up.
Didn't the report say that business park can allow buildings of 45 feet?
Business park does allow a build, here, let me pull it up.
It looks like industrial.
That's where I think some of the,
So one thing that I want to
That's why I voted
clarify
against the
for
other one.
staff is, I've understood direction that you do want folks to come forward with back in the
Yep.
napkin or a concept
Yep.
plan.
That's-
And
yeah.
this seems like we're making some decisions about their plan before they've even had a chance to come forward with a proposal.
right.
And
'Cause I
get some
do think
feedback from council. This-
even what was submitted will be different from what they potentially.
Right,
submitted as a
so in
concept.
terms of the guidance that we've received, I think it meets the intent of a concept plan. And then all of those concerns, that would be our opportunity to get the feedback on those concerns to ensure that any proposed plan would comply and address any concerns.
Yeah.
And that gives us some time to work on.
I think we talked at a Corcoran Farm something about a buffering and staggering, right? About heights close to homes or roads being lower and then taller as you went in.
Yeah, that was one of the, it was like a staggered, sorry, a graduated height with the setback distance.
Yeah, so my fear is even under business park plan, we could run into the same issue. Even in a concept, I understand it's a concept at this point, but there could easily be a push to an application.
To be clear, so the maximum principal building height in the business park is 45 feet. I did warn the applicant that we were looking at a height transition, and the discussion so far was a limit of 35 feet within the first 100 feet from a residential property line, and then further increases from there. So they actually did keep the buildings 100 feet away from the 40. So that does match the initial discussions. I warned them that it's not final and that it's work in process. That was the initial thought.
Okay.
And so they did try to incorporate that, knowing that that was going to be some feedback received, so.
So one thing that I mentioned to staff that might be fair for us to think about in the context of park planning, because of the Park District Trail running through this parcel, we might want to think about whether we would want to take the full amount of park dedication as land and use that to have a nice broad trail corridor to separate the residential uses on the north from these parcels.
Yeah.
We can get up to 3 acres that way, which could give you, I didn't do the math on it, but 100 feet plus of separation just for the trail. And then we can get reimbursed from the park district for that deferred cash in lieu.
For the part that, not for the entirety of that.
Only probably for the 20-foot width.
Yeah.
No, they want more than 20 feet where we can get it. And they've told us in the past when they've spoken with us that if they can get 100 feet, they would love to get 100
We
feet.
might be able to negotiate that with them. I don't know that the contract.
It might not be
allows us to-
guaranteed,
Yeah.
but I think they would probably
Yeah.
be
Be a
apt to say yes to
conversation.
that.
I don't want to push stuff up on your calendar, but I think we just need to keep it on the forefront.
It is the top priority, and I just think it's going to turn into a three-phase. So a revised work plan was part of the March 28th goal for council, in addition to the feedback from the other places. So my thinking at this point was a three-phase approach to get the more time constraints taken care of so that we can deal with the rest on our own timeline without worrying about a moratorium expiring or a potential application that's already been submitted. This would take, at the very least, an EAW. So and Hope took an EAW. We're here over a year later with the approval. So I do
And I think
we have some time.
We're probably at least a month away from seeing a concept plan, sounds like.
Well, it might be bigger than an EAW too.
I think that's mostly why they pulled it though, is to reduce the square footage.
Okay.
So that they don't have the EIS triggered.
then maybe some of the
We
concerns
we
are
haven't
less.
done an EIS, so that was a,
I think that was the most reason why it was pulled from me.
Okay. So yeah, I think it's important to keep top of mind. But we do have some time built in, like you were saying, and it'd be important for us to give this feedback to an applicant if they come in on that site. And I think we can be very clear on what our concerns are there, because we've seen it similarly before. And it's distinguishing what is business park, what is industrial, and making sure it's not leaning too much into industrial. So, all right. Other than that, I just had a quick thing seeing all our City of Corcoran logos. I was wondering if we had any update on the new logo process and rebranding.
she was here.
Yep.
I've seen it appear some places, where on the webpage or something.
So I included it on the organizational chart, and I recently included it because I think it's awesome and I want to try and use it as much as we can. But Kathy is working with Michelle and with our communications staff at Aaron on a branding strategy. There have been some requests, the mayor's talked with me about potentially expanding some options for apparel. I shared with him things that I did in a previous city that provides a lot more options at the cost of those who are interested in it. And it doesn't cost us anything to run those things. So we'll,
Like an online
We'll
store.
have to change all the park and rec stuff too then.
Everything.
yeah, there's an implementation plan in
I
terms
just
of
bought a bunch
conversion of
park and
branding.
rec stuff.
Well,
I'll get my
It's
money
an
back.
antique now,
There's going to be an update at the March 14th meeting. Local and city branding update.
vintage,
All sales are final.
vintage.
But it's more like just a font. I feel it could be like an alternate parks. Just kind of a.
Is our meeting still going on?
Technically, but no, I would like to see something like an online store option to give us some options, because
Yeah, that would be cool.
I'd spend all my mayor salary on some Corcoran gear.
Makes great
All
Christmas
two,
gift.
like
I'm a
$400
buyer.
a
I got all
month or
my
whatever I
kids'
get.
city, Corcoran Park and Rec shirts.
Well, they don't.
Corcoran
They don't
kids.
make them in 8-week-old. I don't think.
Corcoran what?
Corcoran
So,
kids.
You can shrink them.
Yes.
once we can get one for
We can
Logan,
find one.
we'll.
We can find one.
But yeah, all the more reason to get the store, get some baby stuff
Yeah.
for my baby.
I move to adjourn.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye.